What does it mean to hold a shadow that knows your name, to cradle a thing so small it slips into a pocket, yet so heavy it bends the heart toward silence? In the green heart of the Shire, where laughter once bloomed like wildflowers, a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins faced a choice that echoed beyond his days, beyond the hills he loved, into the vastness of a world unseen. Why did he, of all creatures, choose to release the One Ring, to step away from its golden whisper and walk into a darkness where no promise of power could follow? This is not a tale of thrones or swords, nor of victories carved in stone. It is a story of a single moment when a small hand unclenched and let fall a weight that could have bound all hands, all hopes, all futures. To trace this moment, we must wander not across the wide plains of Middle-earth, but through the quiet paths of a soul, Bilbo's soul, and perhaps our own. For Middle-earth is no distant land. It is the echo of our longings, the mirror of our fears. And the ring, that circle of fire-forged gold, is no mere jewel. It is the weight of desire, the voice of temptation, the shadow that speaks when all else is still. Let us begin then in the Shire, where the world seems whole, where the rhythm of life is the rustle of leaves, the clink of teacups, the glow of a pipe beneath a twilight sky. Here Bilbo Baggins was born, a creature of comfort. His days spun from the simple threads of routine mornings of bacon and eggs, afternoons tending roses, evenings filled with tales by the fire. Yet within him stirred a restlessness, a whisper of something more inherited from his mother's Tookish blood, those kin who were said to chase adventures and heed the call of wizards. This whisper was faint, drowned by the Shire's song, but it waited like a seed beneath the earth for a spark to bring it to life. That spark came with Gandalf, the Grey Wanderer, whose staff tapped against Bilbo's door like the hand of fate. Picture it, a hobbit content in his smallness, standing at the threshold of Bag End, facing a figure whose eyes held the weight of stars. Gandalf brought no promises of glory, only an invitation to step beyond the known, to join a band of dwarves seeking a mountain's treasure and a dragon's end. Why did Bilbo answer? Not for wealth, not for renown, but because a part of him yearned for a story larger than his own, a tale where a hobbit might matter. This is the first thread of our journey, the courage that blooms in a heart unprepared, the willingness to walk when every step is shadowed by doubt. So Bilbo left the Shire, his feet carrying him into a world of wonders and terrors. He faced trolls with their brutish hunger goblins, with their cruel laughter mountains that roared with storms, uncaring of a hobbit's fears. Yet it was in the deep places, in the lightless tunnels beneath the misty mountains, that his path turned toward shadow. There, in the cold and dripping dark, Bilbo found the ring. Or perhaps it found him, a small golden circle gleaming faintly on the stone as if it had waited through ages for his hand. He did not know its power, its malice, its name. He saw only a trinket, a curiosity to tuck away and forget. But the ring does not forget. It watches, it binds, and in that moment Bilbo became its bearer, though its weight was yet a whisper. What is the ring? This golden thing that hums with a life of its own. It is not merely metal, but a will, a fragment of Sauron's darkness forged into being. It is the temptation to command, to possess, to shape the world to one's heart. It offers power, but its price is the soul's slow fading, the heart's quiet surrender to a shadow that grows with every breath. For Bilbo, the ring was first a tool, a way to vanish, to slip past danger. He used it to outwit Gollum, that wretched creature who had borne it through years, uncounted his mind, a ruin of obsession. He used it to save his companions, to become more than a hobbit, in a world too vast for his measure. But each use was a thread weaving him closer to the ring's will, a net he could not yet see. Let us linger in those tunnels where the air was thick with despair, and consider Gollum, for he is the shadow of what Bilbo might have become. Once Gollum was Smeagol, a creature of rivers and laughter, not unlike a hobbit in his joys. But the ring came to him as it comes to all, with a promise of greatness. Smeagol took it, killed for it, and in that act he began to unravel. The ring gave him long life, but it was a chain binding him to a half-life of torment. His body withered, his heart a maze of love and hate for the thing called precious. When Bilbo met him, Gollum was a spectre, a creature who could neither bear the ring's presence nor its loss. Yet in their meeting there was a moment of light, a choice that shone like a star in the dark. Bilbo, cloaked by the ring's power, stood over Gollum, his sword drawn, the creature weeping for his lost treasure. Gollum was helpless, unaware, a pitiable thing lost in sorrow. Bilbo could have struck. He could have ended Gollum's pain, secured his own escape. But he did not. Tolkien writes that pity stayed his hand, pity born of some deep well within him, a mercy that rose unbidden. This is no small act. In a world where strength is measured by might, Bilbo's pity was a defiance, a rejection of the ring's logic. The ring thrives on dominion, on the erasure of the other. Pity sees the other, feels their wound, and chooses not to deepen it. In that moment, Bilbo began to resist, though he did not know it. For resistance begins not in grand deeds, but in the quiet choices that shape the heart. This moment of pity is a cornerstone of our tale, for it reveals a truth. The ring's power is not unbreakable. It can be challenged not by force, but by the soul's silent strength. Yet this challenge came at a cost. The ring, though it could not yet claim, Bilbo began to weave its will around him. He returned to the Shire, his adventure done, his name sung in tales of dragons and gold. But he was changed. The ring was with him, a secret kept even from Gandalf, a weight borne in silence, and silence, as we shall see, is both a refuge and a trap. In the Shire, Bilbo's life resumed its rhythm, but there was a dissonance now, a shadow that lingered at the edge of his joy. He was restless, older in ways that time could not account for. The ring stretched his years, but it did not grant him peace. He began to feel thin, as if his soul were a thread pulled too tight, a life stretched beyond its measure. Tolkien's words here echo the human heart: to live long, but not deeply, to cling to a thing that promises life, but gives only its shadow. Bilbo did not yet know the ring's nature, but he felt its burden, a weight that grew with each passing season. What is it to carry a burden you cannot name, to sense a shadow in the heart's quiet moments, a whisper that speaks when the world is still? For Bilbo, the ring was both treasure and torment, a thing he cherished, yet feared, a secret he guarded, yet longed to escape. He used it sparingly, but each use was a step deeper into its grasp. He called it precious, an echo of Gollum's voice, a sign that the ring's will was beginning to blend with his own, yet even here there was resistance. Bilbo's heart, rooted in the Shire's simplicity, in the memory of pity, in the love of friends, did not yield easily. Temptation is not surrender. It is a battle fought in the soul's silence, where no one sees but the stars. Let us linger on this battle, for it is the heart of our story. The ring's temptation is not a thunderous call to power, but a soft voice, subtle speaking in the language of the heart. For Bilbo, it whispered of safety, of invisibility, of a way to remain untouched by the world's dangers. But safety is a lie when it costs the self. The ring offered Bilbo a kind of eternity, but it was Gollum's eternity, a life without end but without meaning. And Bilbo, though he did not yet know the ring's full malice, began to sense its taunt. He felt it in the moments when the ring seemed to burn against his skin, when its gold grew heavy, when its whisper grew loud. This sensing, this unease, is the second thread of our tale, the awakening of conscience. Conscience is not a shout, but a murmur, a voice that grows in the stillness. For Bilbo, it spoke in the moments when the ring was heaviest, when he looked at the Shire and saw a world he could not protect with gold. It spoke in the memory of Gandalf's warnings, in the pity he had shown Gollum, in the love he bore for those who shared his days. Conscience is the soul's guide, pointing the way when the path is dark, when the burden threatens to crush. But to hear it is not enough. It must be followed. And so Bilbo stood at a crossroads, though he did not yet see it. The ring was his, a prize won by chance, a secret kept by choice. But it was also a chain binding him to a fate he could not fathom. To release it would be to step into the unknown, to surrender a part of himself, to face a world where he was no longer hidden, no longer safe. To keep it would be to walk Gollum's path, to become a shadow of the Hobbit he had been. This is the question that weaves through our tale, what led Bilbo to choose the harder path, to open his hand and let the ring fall. Let us walk with him now through the years that followed as the ring's weight grew, and his heart wrestled with its shadow. The Shire was still green, the stars still bright, but Bilbo's world was shifting. He was shifting. And in that shift, in the slow unfolding of his choice, we find the first echoes of a truth, larger than the ring, larger than Middle-earth, that the greatest battles are fought not with steel, but with the will to let go. The years passed, and Bilbo's restlessness deepened. He planned a great party, his 111st birthday, a celebration to mark his long life, and perhaps to silence the whispers in his heart. But the ring was there, always there, a weight in his pocket, a shadow in his dreams. And when the time came to leave the Shire, to set out on one last journey, he faced a moment of truth. Gandalf, wise and stern, urged him to leave the ring behind, to pass it to Frodo, his heir. Bilbo resisted, his voice sharp, his hand clutching the ring as if it were his soul. But in the end, he chose. He let it go. He walked away. This is the moment we seek to understand, when Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit of no great might, did what few could. He abandoned the ring in darkness, but to understand it, we must go deeper into the silence that shaped his choice, into the faith that guided his hand, into the hope that lingered when all else faded. For this is not the end of our tale, but its beginning, a journey into the heart of a choice that echoes through the ages, a song that fades into the memory of stars. The stars above the Shire glimmered like memories of a world unshadowed, their light falling soft on the hills where Bilbo Baggins walked, a hobbit changed by a weight he could not name. He had returned to Bag End, his tale of dragons and treasures woven into the fabric of his days. But the ring remained a golden splinter in the heart of his peace, a whisper that grew louder in the stillness. He had stood at the edge of choice, his hand trembling as he clutched the ring, Gandalf's voice a steady call to release it. And he had chosen not without struggle, not without pain, but with a strength that seemed to rise from the roots of his soul. He left the ring behind, passed it to Frodo, and stepped into the unknown. Yet the question lingers like a shadow cast by starlight. What led Bilbo to this moment, to abandon the one ring in darkness, to turn from a power that promised to hold time itself in its grasp? To walk this path, we must linger in the years that shaped his choice, in the silences that spoke when words failed, in the temptations that tested the heart's quiet resolve. Bilbo's decision was not a single spark, but a fire built slowly, fed by moments of doubt, of longing, of defiance against the ring's will. Let us step into those years when the Shire was green and the ring was a secret, a burden he carried alone. It is here, in the ordinary rhythm of days, that the extraordinary took root in the soul of a hobbit who seemed too small for such a weight, yet bore it with a grace he did not yet see. The Shire was a land of endings, or so it seemed to those who loved its simplicity. Adventures were for songs, not for living. And Bilbo, now a legend among his kin, settled into a life that should have been enough. He wrote his book there and back again, its pages alive with the roar of Smaug, the courage of dwarves, the wonder of eagles soaring above the flame. But the ring was not in those pages. It was in his pocket, inert his dreams, in the moments when the fire burned low, and a voice spoke soft as a leaf's fall, yet sharp as a thorn. The ring did not demand, it suggested. It spoke of safety, of a way to keep the Shire's green hills untouched by sorrow. It spoke of legacy, of a name that would not fade. And Bilbo listened, though he did not yet know the price of listening. What is it to live with a secret that hums with life? To hold a thing that sees your fears before you name them, that knows your heart's hidden corners? For Bilbo, the ring was a riddle, a treasure, and a torment. He used it rarely, slipping it on to dodge the Sackville Bagginses or to wander unseen through the fields, but each use was a step deeper into its shadow. Tolkien tells us he began to call it precious, a word that carried the echo of Gollum's voice, a sign that the ring's will was threading itself into his own. Yet Bilbo was not Gollum. He was not Smeagol, who had killed, to claim the ring, who had let it consume him until only a husk remained. Bilbo's heart was tethered to the Shire, to the laughter of friends, to the memory of pity shown in a dark tunnel. And this tether held, though it strained against the ring's pull. Let us linger on this strain, for it is the heart of our tale. The ring's power lies not in its gold, but in its voice, a voice that knows the soul's weaknesses and speaks in its own tongue. For Bilbo, it whispered of fear, fear of loss, of aging, of a world that would forget the Hobbit, who had faced a dragon. It whispered of desire, of a way to hold the Shire's joys forever, to keep the stars from fading. These are not the desires of kings, but of a heart that loves deeply, that clings to the small miracles of life, a well-baked loaf, a pipe's curl of smoke, the sound of a stream under moonlight. The ring promised to preserve these, but its promises were shadows, for it kept nothing but itself. In the quiet of Bag End, Bilbo began to feel the ring's weight, not as a heaviness in his pocket, but as a shadow on his soul. He was older now, his years stretching beyond a hobbit's natural span, yet he did not feel whole. Tolkien writes that he felt thin, sort of stretched like butter scraped over too much bread. This is the ring's true malice. It does not destroy with flame or steel, but with a slow theft, a draining of the self that leaves only longing behind. Bilbo sensed this, though he could not name it. He sensed it in the restlessness that kept him awake, in the unease that crept into his laughter, in the moments when the ring seemed to pulse with a will of its own. This sensing is the third thread of our tale, the awakening of awareness, the slow realization of a truth too heavy to bear alone. Bilbo was no scholar of ancient lore, no wizard versed in the ways of power. He was a hobbit, a creature of earth and hearth, yet he began to see the ring for what it was, not a prize, but a peril. This seeing was not a sudden blaze, but a gradual light like dawn breaking over the Brandywine. It came in the moments when he reached for the ring and paused when he looked at Frodo and saw a future he could not shape, when he heard Gandalf's voice, gentle yet unyielding, speaking of things older and darker than the Shire's soft hills. Gandalf, the Grey Wanderer, was Bilbo's guide, not with maps or paths, but with a light that revealed shadows. He came to Bag End not as a master, but as a friend, his eyes carrying a sorrow Bilbo could not yet fathom. It was Gandalf who first named the ring's danger, who urged Bilbo to see it not as his own, but as a burden that belonged to no one. "It is not yours," he said, "save by chance, and that an evil one." These words were a blade cutting through the lie Bilbo had told himself that the ring was his, one fairly kept rightly. But they were also a door opening to a path, however steep, toward freedom. Let us pause in the firelight of Bag End, where the air was warm, but the heart was troubled, and consider the role of friendship in Bilbo's journey. The ring thrives in solitude, in the silence where no other voice can reach. It is a lonely power binding its bearer to itself alone. But Bilbo was not alone. He had Frodo, his nephew, his heir, a hobbit whose curiosity and kindness filled Bag End with life. He had Gandalf, whose wisdom was a shield against despair. He had the memory of dwarves of Thorin Oakenshield, whose courage had shown him that even the smallest could stand against the dark. These bonds, these threads of love and trust, were Bilbo's strength, though he did not yet know their measure. Frodo, above all, was a mirror and a hope. Bilbo saw in him the Hobbit he had been, eager, unscarred, alive with wonder. But he saw, too, a future he could not claim, a world that would belong to others. The ring whispered that Frodo could be protected, that its power could keep him safe from harm. But Bilbo in his heart knew the lie. He knew that safety bought with the ring's gold was a cage, a shadow that would dim Frodo's light. And so he began to think of letting go, not as a surrender, but as a gift to Frodo, to the Shire, to a world he loved more than himself. This thought, this seed of sacrifice, is the fourth thread of our tale, the rising of love as a force stronger than fear. Love is not a banner raised in triumph, but a quiet flame burning steady in the coldest dark. For Bilbo, love was the Shire's rolling hills, the chatter of hobbits. At market, the hope that Frodo might walk free of the shadow he carried. It was this love that began to shift the balance, to make the ring's promises seem empty, its weight unbearable. But love alone does not prevail. It must be chosen, made real through pain, through the act of release. And pain there was. The ring did not yield easily. As Bilbo's resolve grew, so did its voice, sharper now, more desperate. It spoke of betrayal, of loss, of a world that would cast him aside. It clung to him, a weight that seemed to grow heavier with each thought of letting go. Tolkien tells us of the moment when Bilbo stood in Bag End, Gandalf at his side, preparing to leave the Shire for good. He had planned his departure, his 11th birthday, a grand party to mark his years, and his farewell, a vanishing act to seal his legend. But the ring was there, in his pocket, in his heart, and it would not be set aside. Picture that moment, a hobbit, small and weathered, his hand curled around a thing that promised everything and demanded all. Gandalf's voice was soft but firm. "Leave it behind, Bilbo. It is not yours to keep." And Bilbo resisted, his voice rising, his eyes flashing with a fire not his own. "It's mine," he cried, "my own, my precious." These words, so like Gollum's, were a warning, a glimpse of the path that waited. But Bilbo was not Gollum. He was not alone. And in that moment something shifted. Something broke, not the ring, but the chain it had forged around his soul. What broke not courage, for courage is the act, not the cause. Not wisdom, for Bilbo was no sage. It was faith, a quiet faith, that there was a world beyond the ring, a goodness that did not need its power to endure. Faith is not the absence of doubt, but the choice to move forward despite it. For Bilbo, it was the faith that Frodo could bear what he could not, that the Shire would stand, that his small act might matter in a tale larger than his own. This faith, this fragile light, was what led him to open his hand, to let the ring fall, to walk away. But the walking was not without cost. Tolkien writes that Bilbo left Bag End with a lightness, singing as he went. But there was a shadow too, a longing that lingered like a bruise. The ring had marked him as it marks all who bear it. And though he was free, he was not untouched. He wandered to Rivendell, to the house of Elrond, where the air was filled with songs of ancient days. But even there the ring's echo remained. He spoke of it to Frodo, his voice sharp with a hunger he could not name. This is the fifth thread of our tale, the cost of release, the scar that does not fade, the memory of a weight that shaped the soul. Let us linger in Rivendell, where Bilbo sat among elves, his heart caught between peace and yearning. The ring was gone, but its shadow lingered, a reminder that freedom is not the end of pain, but the choice to live with it. Bilbo's choice was not a triumph in the way of battles or crowns. It was a quieter thing, a step taken in darkness, guided by a light he could scarcely see. And yet it was enough. It was enough to change the course of Middle-earth, to set Frodo on his path, to hold the world from shadow. The stars above Rivendell sang of hope, of choices made, and burdens borne. Bilbo's tale was not finished, but it was shifting, weaving itself into a larger song, a song of loss and love, of silence and faith. And as we walk with him, we see that his choice was not the end, but a beginning that draws us deeper into the heart of temptation, into the hope that endures when all else fades. For this is not the story of a ring, but of a hobbit who carried it, and of the light that shone in darkness, unquenched by its shadow. The halls of Rivendell shimmered with a light that seemed to sing as if the stones themselves held the memory of ancient songs. Bilbo Baggins, now far from the Shire's green embrace, sat among elves, his heart a tapestry of peace and yearning, woven with threads of a choice that had changed him forever. He had let the ring fall, left it in Frodo's hands, and walked away singing as he went. Yet the ring's echo lingered, a faint hum in the quiet of his soul, a shadow that did not fade, even in the house of Elrond. The stars above burned with a clarity that pierced the heart, and in their light the question lingered still. What led Bilbo to abandon the One Ring in darkness, to surrender a power that promised to hold the world in its palm? To trace this question, we must wander not through the battles of Middle-earth, but through the silent spaces of Bilbo's heart, where the weight of his choice settled like dust after a storm. His act of release was not the end, but a doorway opening onto a path where the ring's shadow still walked beside him. Let us step into those years in Rivendell, where the air was filled with the music of elves, yet the memory of a golden weight pressed against Bilbo's soul. It is here, in the aftermath of his choice, that we see the cost of letting go the strength it demanded and the hope that flickered like a star in the dark. Rivendell was a place of rest, or so it seemed. The last homely house nestled in a valley where the Bruinen sang was a haven for the weary, a place where time seemed to pause, where the heart could breathe. Bilbo, now old even for a hobbit, found solace here, his days filled with the scratch of quill on parchment, the soft voices of elves, the tales of ages past. He wrote poems, translated lore, and sang of the Shire's green hills as if to hold them close in a world that felt both near and far. But the ring was not gone from his thoughts. It lingered, a memory that stirred in the quiet moments, a hunger that rose unbidden when Frodo visited, bearing news of the world beyond. What is it to live with the ghost of a burden? To be free, yet marked by the weight you carried. For Bilbo, the ring was no longer in his pocket, but its shadow was in his dreams, in the moments when he spoke its name, precious with a sharpness that startled even himself. Tolkien tells us of a moment in Rivendell when Bilbo, seeing Frodo, asked to hold the ring again, his voice eager, his eyes alight with a fire not his own. Frodo drew back, and Bilbo saw for a moment the truth: he was not untouched. The ring had left a scar, a longing that did not fade, a part of him that still reached for its golden promise. This is the sixth thread of our tale, the wound of freedom, the truth that letting go does not erase the past, but shapes the soul in its image. Let us linger on this wound, for it is a mirror of the human heart. The ring's power is not only in its presence, but in its absence, in the space it leaves behind. For Bilbo, that space was filled with questions. Had he done right to pass the ring to Frodo? Had he abandoned his heir to a fate too heavy to bear? These questions were not loud, not a storm, but a tide rising in the quiet of night when the stars seemed to watch and the world held its breath. Bilbo was no warrior, no king, yet he bore a guilt that only those who love deeply can know, the guilt of giving a burden to another, of stepping away when the heart longs to protect. Frodo, now the ring's bearer, was both Bilbo's joy and his sorrow. In Rivendell, their meetings were moments of light filled with laughter and tales of the Shire, but there was a shadow, too, a weight in Frodo's eyes that Bilbo recognized, for he had seen it in his own. The ring was working its will as it had on him, as it had on Gollum, as it would on all who carried it. Bilbo saw this, and his heart ached not with regret, but with a love that wished to shield, yet knew it could not. This love was a fire burning steady, but it was also a wound, for it reminded him of his choice of the moment he had opened his hand and let the ring fall. Let us pause here in the soft light of Rivendell and consider the nature of love in Bilbo's journey. Love is not a shield that keeps all harm at bay, but a light that shines in the dark, guiding the way when the path is lost. For Bilbo, love was the Shire, its people, its peace. It was Frodo, his laughter, his courage. It was the hope that Middle-earth might endure even if he could not see its end. This love had led him to release the ring to spare Frodo from a life bound to its shadow. But love is not without cost. It asks us to bear the pain of others, to carry their burdens in our hearts, even when our hands are empty. In Rivendell, Bilbo's heart was not empty, though it was heavy. He watched Frodo, saw the ring's weight upon him, and felt the stirrings of a truth he had glimpsed in the Shire. The ring's power was not his to control, nor Frodo's, nor anyone's. It was a force that used its bearers, bending them to its will until they were no longer themselves. Bilbo had escaped this fate, but the escape was not a triumph, not a crown to wear. It was a quiet thing, a step taken in faith, a choice to trust that the world could be more than the ring's shadow. This is the seventh thread of our tale, the faith that endures beyond the act, the belief that a small choice can ripple through the ages, unseen but unfading. Faith for Bilbo was not a certainty but a hope, a willingness to believe in a goodness larger than himself. In Rivendell, this faith grew, fed by the songs of elves, by the wisdom of Elrond, by the memory of Gandalf's voice. He began to see his choice not as an end, but as a beginning, a thread in a tapestry he could not fully see. The ring had passed to Frodo, and with it a task that would shape the fate of Middle-earth. Bilbo did not know the end of that task. How could he? But he trusted that his choice had mattered, that his small act of release had set something in motion, something greater than the ring's malice. Let us linger on this trust, for it is a cornerstone of our story. The ring thrives on despair, on the belief that its power is absolute, that no choice can stand against it. But Bilbo's choice was a defiance, a quiet rebellion that said the world was not the ring's to claim. In Rivendell, he began to understand this not in words, but in the heart's silent language. He saw it in Frodo's courage in the gathering of elves and men, to face the growing shadow in the songs that spoke of light enduring through ages of darkness. These were signs, small but bright, that his choice had not been in vain. Yet, even in Rivendell, the ring's shadow lingered not only in Bilbo's heart, but in the world beyond. News came of Sauron's rise, of the ring's journey, of Frodo's path into peril. Bilbo listened, his hands trembling as he wrote, his voice soft as he sang of the Shire. He was old now, his body frail, but his heart was alive with a fire that the ring could not quench. This fire was hope, the eighth thread of our tale. A hope that did not promise victory, but trusted in the possibility of it. Hope is not a shield, but a seed planted in the dark, growing toward a light unseen. Hope for Bilbo was Frodo's face, the memory of his laughter in Bag End. It was the Shire, its hills still green, in his mind its people still free. It was the belief that Middle-earth could endure, that the stars would shine, even if he did not see them. In Rivendell, this hope was tested, for the news of Frodo's journey was heavy with danger. The ring was moving, seeking its master, and Frodo was its bearer, a hobbit, as small as Bilbo had been, yet carrying a weight that could break the world. Bilbo felt this weight not in his pocket, but in his soul, a burden he could not carry but could not set aside. Let us pause here in the quiet of Elrond's house and consider the nature of legacy in Bilbo's journey. Legacy is not a name carved in stone, but a gift given to those who come after a light passed from hand to hand. For Bilbo, his legacy was Frodo not as a possession but as a hope, a hobbit who might carry the light he had kindled. But legacy is not without pain. It asks us to trust, to let go, to believe that the light will endure even when we are gone. Bilbo's choice to release the ring was a legacy, a gift to Frodo, to the Shire, to Middle-earth. But it was a gift that cost him dearly, for it bound his heart to Frodo's fate. In Rivendell, Bilbo's heart was bound, yet it was also free. He was no longer the ring's bearer, but he was its witness, a hobbit who had seen its power and chosen to walk away. This choice was his strength, though it was not a strength he claimed. It was a quiet thing, a flame that burned in the dark, fed by love, by faith, by hope. And as he sat among elves listening to their songs, he began to see his place in the larger tale, not as a hero, but as a thread woven into a tapestry that stretched beyond his days. The songs of Rivendell spoke of loss of battles fought and loves lost, but they spoke too of endurance of light that returned after the longest night. Bilbo listened, and in those songs he heard the echo of his own journey. He had carried the ring, felt its weight, heard its voice. He had let it go, not because he was strong, but because he was weak, because he loved, because he trusted. This is the ninth thread of our tale, the strength of weakness. The power that comes not from holding, but from releasing, not from claiming, but from giving. Let us linger on this strength, for it is the heart of Bilbo's story. The ring promises power, but its power is a lie, a chain that binds the soul. Bilbo's power was in his choice, in the moment he opened his hand, in the faith that guided him, in the hope that sustained him. In Rivendell, he began to see this not as a victory, but as a truth that the ring could not touch. He was old, his body frail, but his heart was alive, burning with a light that the ring could not dim. The stars above Rivendell sang of a world that endured, of choices that mattered, of small hands that shaped the fate of many. Bilbo's tale was not ended, but it was changing, weaving itself into a song of loss and love, of silence and hope. And as we walk with him, we see that his choice was not a resolution, but a revelation that draws us deeper into the heart of faith, into the hope that burns when all else fades. For this is not the story of a ring, but of a hobbit who carried it, and of the light that shone in darkness, unbroken by its shadow. The light of Rivendell fell like a soft rain, its glow weaving through the leaves, as if the valley itself held its breath for the tales yet to unfold. Bilbo Baggins, old now beyond the count of hobbit years, sat in the quiet of Elrond's house, his quill tracing lines of poetry, his voice humming songs of the Shire's lost summers. The ring was gone from his hands, left behind in a choice that had shaken his soul. Yet its shadow lingered, a faint pulse in the stillness, a memory that stirred when the world grew silent. The stars above sang of choices that echoed through time, and in their light the question burned still, what led Bilbo to abandon the one ring in darkness, to step away from a power that whispered of eternity. To follow this question, we must walk not through the wide world of Middle-earth, but through the hidden chambers of Bilbo's heart, where the echoes of his choice reverberated, shaping the man he had become. His act of release was not a closed door, but a window opening onto a vista of memory and meaning, where the ring's absence was as potent as its presence. Let us linger in Rivendell, where the songs of elves wove a tapestry of loss and longing, and explore the quiet truths that Bilbo found there, truths of silence, of legacy, of a hope that endured beyond the reach of shadow. In the halls of Rivendell, time seemed to bend its flow, softened by the music of water and the wisdom of ages. Bilbo, frail but bright-eyed, spent his days among scrolls and stories, his heart tethered to the Shire, yet open to the vastness of the world. He translated elvish lore, wrote verses of hobbitish whimsy, and listened to tales of heroes whose names were carved in the stars. But the ring was never far from his thoughts. It was a ghost, not of gold, but of longing, a longing that rose when he spoke with Frodo, when he heard of the ring's journey, when at a moment he felt the weight of years that should have ended, but did not. This is the 10th thread of our tale. The persistence of memory, the way a choice once made, continues to shape the soul like a river carving stone. Let us linger on this memory, for it is a mirror of the human condition. The ring's power was not only in its grasp, but in its hold on the heart even after it was gone. For Bilbo, the ring was a wound that had healed, but left a scar, a part of him that still reached for its promise of safety, of permanence. In Rivendell he spoke of it rarely, but when he did, his voice carried a hunger, a flicker of the fire that had burned in Bag End when he had clutched it, calling it precious. These moments were not a return to temptation, but a reminder of its cost, a testament to the strength it had taken to let go. The ring had marked him as it marked all who bore it, but Bilbo's mark was different. Not a chain, but a choice, a light that shone through the scar. This light was hope, a hope that grew in Rivendell, fed by the beauty of the valley, by the courage of those who gathered there, by the songs that spoke of light returning after darkness. But hope is not a simple thing. It is not a promise, not a certainty, but a willingness to believe in a world beyond the self, a world where small acts matter. For Bilbo, hope was Frodo, his heir, his heart's joy, now walking a path he could not follow. News of Frodo's journey came to Rivendell, carried by travelers, by Gandalf, by the whispers of elves. The ring was moving, its malice waking, and Frodo was its bearer, a hobbit as small as Bilbo had been, yet carrying a burden that could unmake the world. Bilbo listened, his hands still, his heart heavy with a love that could not shield, but could not turn away. Let us pause here in the soft glow of Rivendell and consider the nature of love in Bilbo's journey. Love is not a wall that keeps sorrow at bay, but a bridge spanning the distance between hearts, bearing the weight of their pain. For Bilbo, love was Frodo's laughter, the memory of Bag End filled with warmth. It was the Shire, its hills green in his dreams. It was Middle-earth, a world he had helped to save, though he could not see its end. This love had led him to release the ring, to spare Frodo a life bound to its shadow. But love is not without its thorns. It asks us to carry the burdens of those we love, to feel their wounds as our own, to trust, when trust is all we have. In Rivendell, Bilbo's love for Frodo was a fire and a wound. He saw the ring's weight in Frodo's eyes, a weight he had known, a weight he had passed on. This knowledge was a pain not of guilt, but of responsibility, the pain of knowing that his choice had set Frodo on a path of peril. Yet it was also a strength, for it reminded him of why he had let go, not for himself, but for others, for a world that might endure. This is the 11th thread of our tale, the strength of sacrifice, the power that comes not from holding fast, but from opening the hand, not from keeping, but from giving. Sacrifice for Bilbo was not a grand gesture, but a quiet act, a choice made in the heart's silence. In Rivendell, he began to see this choice as part of a larger song, a song that wove through the ages, carried by those who chose hope over despair, love over power. The elves sang of such choices, of Beren, who faced the dark for Luthien, of Arundel, who sailed to the west for the world's salvation. Bilbo, a hobbit among such tales, felt small, yet not diminished. His choice was no less, for it was his own, a thread in the tapestry of Middle-earth, shimmering with its own light. Let us linger on this tapestry, for it is the heart of our story. The ring thrives on isolation, on the belief that one soul can claim the world. But Bilbo's choice was a rejection of this lie, a testament to the power of connection, of community, of a world larger than the self. In Rivendell, he saw this world taking shape in the council that gathered to face Sauron's shadow, in the fellowship that would carry Frodo's burden, in the courage of those who stood against the dark. These were signs, small but bright, that his choice had mattered, that his small act of release had kindled a flame that others would carry. Yet even in Rivendell, the shadow of the ring lingered not only in Bilbo's heart, but in the world beyond. The news of Frodo's journey was heavy with danger, each tale a weight that pressed against Bilbo's hope. He heard of Mordor's fires, of the Nazgul's pursuit, of the perils that waited in the dark. He listened, his quill still, his voice soft as he sang of the Shire, as if to hold it close against the gathering storm. He was old now, his body a fragile thing, but his heart burned with a fire that the ring could not touch. This fire was faith, the 12th thread of our tale, a faith that did not promise salvation but trusted in its possibility. Faith for Bilbo was not a map, but a star guiding him when the path was lost. In Rivendell, this faith grew, fed by the wisdom of Elrond, by the courage of Aragorn, by the memory of Gandalf's voice. He began to see his choice not as an end, but as a beginning, a spark that had set Frodo's journey in motion. He did not know the end of that journey. How could he? But he trusted that it mattered, that the light he had kindled would endure even if he did not see it. This trust was his strength, though it was not a strength he claimed. It was a quiet thing, a flame that burned in the dark, fed by love, by hope, by the belief that the world was not the ring's to claim. Let us pause here in the quiet of Rivendell and consider the nature of legacy in Bilbo's journey. Legacy is not a monument, but a seed planted in the hearts of others, growing toward a future unseen. For Bilbo, his legacy was Frodo not as a possession, but as a hope, a hobbit who carried the light he had passed on. But legacy is not without pain. It asks us to let go, to trust that the seed will grow even when we are gone. Bilbo's choice to release the ring was a legacy, a gift to Frodo, to the Shire, to Middle-earth. But it was a gift that bound his heart to Frodo's fate, a bond that was both joy and sorrow. In Rivendell, Bilbo's heart was both heavy and light. He was no longer the ring's bearer, but he was its witness, a hobbit who had felt its power and chosen to walk away. This choice was his power, though it was not a power he wielded. It was a quiet thing, a light that shone in the dark, fed by the memory of the Shire, by the love of Frodo, by the hope that Middle-earth might endure. And as he sat among elves listening to their songs, he began to see his place in the larger tale, not as a hero, but as a voice, a note in a song that stretched beyond his days. The songs of Rivendell spoke of loss, of loves lost, and battles fought, but they spoke too of return of light that burned through the longest night. Bilbo listened, and in those songs he heard the echo of his own journey. He had carried the ring, felt its weight, heard its voice. He had let it go, not because he was mighty, but because he was small, because he loved, because he hoped. This is the 13th thread of our tale, the power of smallness, the strength that comes not from greatness, but from humility, not from claiming the world, but from giving it back. Let us linger on this smallness, for it is the heart of Bilbo's story. The ring promises greatness, but its greatness is a lie, a chain that binds the soul. Bilbo's greatness was in his choice in the moment. He opened his hand in the faith that guided him, in the hope that sustained him. In Rivendell, he began to see this not as a triumph, but as a truth that the ring could not touch. He was old, his body frail, but his heart was alive, burning with a light that the ring could not dim. The stars above Rivendell sang of a world that endured, of choices that shaped the fate of many of small hands that held the light against the dark. Bilbo's tale was not ended, but it was weaving itself into a song of loss and love, of silence and hope. And as we walk with him, we see that his choice was not a resolution, but a revelation that draws us deeper into the heart of hope, into the faith that burns when all else fades. For this is not the story of a ring, but of a hobbit who carried it, and of the light that shone in darkness, unyielding to its shadow. The air of Rivendell carried the scent of ancient summers, its light a soft hymn that wove through the trees, as if the valley itself sang of endings and beginnings. Bilbo Baggins, now a frail figure cloaked in years, sat in the quiet of Elrond's house, his hands tracing the edges of old parchment, his voice a whisper of songs that held the Shire's green heart. The ring was gone, a choice made in the firelight of Bag End, its weight passed to Frodo, yet its echo lingered, a faint murmur in the silence of his soul. The stars above burned with a light that seemed to know his name, and in their glow the question lingered still. What led Bilbo to abandon the One Ring in darkness, to release a power that promised to hold the world in its grasp? To answer this, we must wander through the final paths of Bilbo's journey, not in the wide world, but in the quiet spaces where his heart found its rest. His choice was not a single moment, but a song, woven from countless notes: pity in a dark tunnel, love in a hobbit's home, faith in a valley of elves. Let us linger in Rivendell, where the songs of ages met the silence of a hobbit's heart, and trace the final threads of his tale, where loss and hope intertwined, leading not to resolution but to revelation, a truth that fades like a melody into the memory of stars. In Rivendell, Bilbo's days were soft yet heavy with the weight of memory. The valley was a haven, its beauty a balm to the soul, but it could not erase the scar of the ring, the longing that stirred when he thought of Frodo, now far from the Shire, bearing a burden Bilbo had known. He wrote, he sang, he listened to the tales of elves, but his heart was with Frodo, with the ring, with the world he had left behind. News came sparse and shadowed of Frodo's journey, of perils in the wild, of a fellowship bound by hope and haunted by fear. Bilbo listened, his quill still, his eyes fixed on a horizon he could not see. This is the 14th thread of our tale, the burden of waiting, the pain of loving from afar, the silence that holds both hope and dread. Let us linger on this silence, for it is a mirror of the heart's deepest trials. The ring's power was not only in its presence, but in its absence, in the space it left behind, a space filled with questions that had no answers. Had Bilbo's choice been right? Had he spared Frodo or condemned him? These questions were not a storm, but a tide rising in the quiet of night, when the stars watched and the world held its breath. Bilbo was no sage, no warrior, yet he bore a pain that only those who love can know, the pain of trusting another to carry what you could not, of letting go when the heart longs to hold fast. Frodo's journey was Bilbo's shadow, a tale he could not shape, yet could not escape. In Rivendell he heard of the fellowship, of Aragorn's courage, of Gandalf's fall, of the ring's relentless pull. Each tale was a weight not in his pocket, but in his soul, a reminder of the choice that had set this path in motion. Yet in this weight there was also light, a light born of love, of faith, of a hope that refused to fade. Bilbo saw Frodo's courage small as his own had been, and in that courage he saw the echo of his choice, a choice that had given Frodo not a burden but a chance to be more than the ring's shadow, to carry the light of the Shire into the dark. Let us pause here in the quiet of Rivendell and consider the nature of hope in Bilbo's journey. Hope is not a promise, but a possibility, a seed planted in the dark, growing toward a light unseen. For Bilbo, hope was Frodo's face, the memory of his laughter in Bag End. It was the Shire, its hills green in his dreams. It was Middle-earth, a world that might endure even if he did not see its dawn. This hope was tested in Rivendell, for the news of Frodo's journey was heavy with peril. The ring was moving, seeking its master, and Frodo was its bearer, a hobbit as small as Bilbo had been, yet facing a darkness that could swallow the stars. Bilbo felt this darkness not in his hands, but in his heart, a burden he could not carry but could not set aside. Hope for Bilbo was a fire burning steady through the long night. In Rivendell, this fire was fed by the songs of elves, by the wisdom of Elrond, by the memory of choices made in the face of fear. He began to see his choice to release the ring as a note in a larger song, a song that stretched through the ages, carried by those who chose light over shadow, love over power. The elves sang of such choices of Turin, who faced the dragon of Luthien, who danced before the dark. Bilbo, a hobbit among such tales, felt small yet not diminished. His choice was no less, for it was his own, a light that shone in the dark, unquenched by the ring's malice. This is the 15th thread of our tale, the power of small choices. The strength that comes not from greatness, but from the heart's quiet resolve. The ring thrives on the lie that only the mighty matter, that only the powerful can shape the world. But Bilbo's choice was a defiance of this lie, a testament to the power of smallness of a hobbit who opened his hand and let the world breathe. In Rivendell he saw this power reflected in Frodo, in the fellowship, in the countless souls who stood against the dark. These were signs small but bright, that his choice had kindled a flame, that others would carry a flame that might light the world. Yet even in Rivendell, the shadow of the ring lingered not only in Bilbo's heart, but in the world beyond. The news of Frodo's journey grew darker tales of betrayal, of loss of a path that led to Mordor's fires. Bilbo listened, his voice soft as he sang of the Shire, as if to hold its memory against the storm. He was old now, his body a fragile thing, but his heart burned with a faith that the ring could not touch. This faith was not a certainty but a trust, a belief that the world was not the ring's to claim, that the light he had passed to Frodo might endure even if he did not see its end. Let us linger on this faith, for it is the heart of Bilbo's story. Faith is not a map, but a star guiding the way when the path is lost. In Rivendell, Bilbo's faith grew, fed by the courage of those who carried on by the songs that spoke of light, returning after the longest night. He began to see his choice as a gift, not to himself, but to the world, a gift that had set Frodo free to choose to fight, to hope. This is the 16th thread of our tale, the gift of freedom, the power that comes not from holding, but from releasing, not from claiming, but from trusting. Freedom for Bilbo was not the absence of pain, but the choice to live with it, to love despite it, to hope through it. In Rivendell he lived this freedom, though it was not without cost. The ring's scar remained a longing that stirred when he thought of Frodo, a pain that rose when he heard of the world's peril. Yet in this pain there was also peace, a peace born of knowing that he had chosen rightly, that he had given Frodo a chance to be more than the ring's bearer, to be a light in the dark. This peace was his strength, though it was not a strength he claimed. It was a quiet thing, a flame that burned in the silence, fed by love, by faith, by hope. Let us pause here in the soft light of Rivendell and consider the nature of legacy in Bilbo's journey. Legacy is not a name carved in stone, but a light passed from heart to heart, a hope that endures beyond the self. For Bilbo, his legacy was Frodo, not as a possession, but as a possibility, a hobbit who carried the light he had kindled. But legacy is not without sorrow. It asks us to trust, to let go, to believe that the light will endure even when we are gone. Bilbo's choice to release the ring was a legacy, a gift to Frodo, to the Shire, to Middle-earth. But it was a gift that bound his heart to Frodo's fate, a bond that was both joy and pain. In Rivendell, Bilbo's heart was both heavy and light. He was no longer the ring's bearer, but he was its witness, a hobbit who had felt its power and chosen to walk away. This choice was his power, though it was not a power he wielded. It was a quiet thing, a light that shone in the dark, fed by the memory of the Shire, by the love of Frodo, by the hope that Middle-earth might endure. And as he sat among elves listening to their songs, he began to see his place in the larger tale, not as a hero, but as a voice, a note in a song that stretched beyond his days. The songs of Rivendell spoke of loss of loves lost and battles fought, but they spoke too of return of light that burned through the darkest night. Bilbo listened, And in those songs he heard the echo of his own journey. He had carried the ring, felt its weight, heard its voice. He had let it go not because he was mighty, but because he was small, because he loved, because he hoped. This is the 17th thread of our tale, the revelation of love, the truth that love is not a shield, but a light, not a chain, but a freedom, not an end, but a beginning. Let us linger on this revelation, for it is the heart of Bilbo's story. The ring promises power, but its power is a lie, a shadow that binds the soul. Bilbo's power was in his choice, in the moment he opened his hand, in the faith that guided him, in the hope that sustained him. In Rivendell he saw this not as a triumph, but as a truth that the ring could not touch. He was old, his body frail, but his heart was alive, burning with a light that the ring could not dim. And so we come to the end of our journey, not with answers, but with a song that fades into the memory of stars. What led Bilbo to abandon the One Ring in darkness? It was pity born in a tunnel's shadow that stayed his hand. It was love kindled in the Shire's green hills that gave him strength. It was faith, a fragile star that guided him when the path was lost. It was hope, a seed in the dark that trusted in a world beyond the ring. These were the threads of his choice woven into a tapestry that stretched through the ages, a tapestry of smallness, of sacrifice, of a hobbit who carried a weight and let it go. Bilbo's tale is not a resolution, but a revelation, a truth that speaks to the heart of the human condition. We all carry rings, burdens that whisper our names, that promise safety but demand our souls. We all face choices, moments when the hand must open, when the heart must trust, when the soul must hope. Bilbo's choice was his own, yet it is ours, a mirror of the battles fought in silence, of the light that shines in darkness, of the love that endures when all else fades. The stars above Rivendell sang of a world that endured, of choices that shaped the fate of many, of small hands that held the light against the dark. Bilbo's song was fading, his voice a whisper, but it was not lost. It lingered in Frodo's courage, in the Shire's green hills, in the world he had helped to save. And as we leave him in the quiet of Rivendell, we hear the echo of his choice, a melody that does not end, but fades into the memory of stars, a song of a hobbit who carried the ring and of the light that shone in darkness, unbroken, undimmed, eternal.